Awesome. So Sharon, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dahlia, and for all that you do, and for all of your team of collaborators and co-creators. It's just such an honor to be with everyone here tonight on such an auspicious occasion, and the end of something and the beginning of something. And I wish to acknowledge that we're on the unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people. And I wish to acknowledge the full holy grandmother moon that we had in the heavens last night. So I just invite all of you here in this circle tonight to just take a moment to just reflect on this moment in time, and to take a moment to feel the energy from your first Holy Mother, the earth, beneath your feet. And I invite all of you to turn inward to where your life force or your spirit resides, and to pray with me in your own way. And I'm just going to light a little fire here for our ancestors. My people say the stars are the campfires of our ancestors. And so the fire and our ancestors are closely connected. So just feel the beating of your heart. That's the first sound you ever heard. Gitchi Manitou, creator of all life. We give thanks for our ancestors whose rituals, dances, songs, ceremonies, artifacts, prayers, and love lift us up and guide us to this day. And we give thanks for all of the abundance that we have here on our First Holy Mother, for the sacred winds, for the spirit in the fire and the water, and the sacred grounds we have to walk on. And we give thanks for all of creation, those that fly in the sky and swim in the waters and crawl along the earth. We give thanks for the two-leggeds and the four-leggeds, for all the beautiful tree nation and plant nation. And we give thanks for all of the medicines. And we give thanks for all of the sisters and the rainbow nation that's in this circle tonight. And we ask with deep humility that this journey that we're on together be blessed with sacred, holy light. And we ask in a good and humble way that you help us to build and strengthen our community. We ask in a good and humble way that we have visions and dreams that will help protect, comfort, guide us, and inspire us. And we pray and remember all of our sisters who are in the spirit world that are a part of this history. Our sisters who went unnamed and unheard, we hear you now. And we ask with deep humility that we find a path forward to hear our sisters. We ask when we move forward on our path that we strengthen our resolve to heal and to bring light and to bring good medicines, to embrace diversity and embrace the unknown and the healing holy light that's here in the world. And we ask these things for all our sisters in our communities near and far and around the world. And we ask these things, healing, wholeness, and wellness for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, for our nation, and in the world. All my relations. Oh.
Thank you so much for that opening, Sharon. It was beautiful. Just an important reminder of where we've come from and where we are today, and that this time together is intended to honor the past and look forward and honor the shoulders that we are standing on. And we're lucky enough to have 3 of our founders with us this evening. And so we're really thrilled about the opportunity to have this conversation today. So welcome, everyone. We are so excited to be here on International Women's Day, and more importantly, on our 40th anniversary, which is incredible. And I know that we have been talking about this moment for at least the past year, if not longer, and thinking about what it actually means for this organization to be turning 40 today. It's not every nonprofit that gets to do this work over this amount of decades. And so we're so grateful to be here, to be able to continue serving community, and to also continue to evolve and grow and adapt to this world and to what survivors in our communities ask of us. So I am going to just say that folks that are in the chat, we do have a moderator. Emily is going to be watching the chat. And certainly if questions come up during the presentation, during the conversation that will happen, please feel free to pop your questions in the chat. We will have a chance to attend to those near to the end of our time together. And if you have any tech questions, feel free also to ask Emily. I will not be able to watch the chat as we go, so I'll just front load with that. Okay, so in our agenda here, Sharon has welcomed us in such a beautiful and heartfelt way. We're going to dive into WAVAW's history. We've got some timelines of obviously not all of the incredible things that we've managed to do over the past 40 years, but some really key moments in our journey. And then we're going to be looking ahead. And for those of you who have been watching our social media, you'll know that we are rebranding officially as of April 1st, but you're all going to get a sneak peek today. And then we'll move into the fireside chat, and I'll pass it over to Barbara at that time in order to facilitate that conversation. So just as a reminder for some housekeeping, that we recognize International Women's Day as a day to celebrate all marginalized genders. We recognize that, patriarchy and misogyny affects more than just women on these lands, and that not all women have had the opportunity to have their rights honored over the past 111 years since 1911, since International Women's Day became a thing. So also acknowledging that very much in the early days that it was white women whose rights were being centered when it came to International Women's Day. And while there's been a lot of work to ensure that other women are seen and felt heard, the reality is we still have to acknowledge that there are great disparities about which women. And the past couple of weeks, particularly in the States, and I know here as well, trans women have been facing unimaginable levels of misogyny and hatred towards them publicly. And so just sending that reminder, and also our thoughts and our activism and our fight to ensure that we're including trans women in our International Women's Day. So for those that know me, you all know that I'm a bit of a historical sociology nerd, and I feel like Barbara shares this sentiment as well, that we just feel it's so important at this time to record feminist herstory and history, because it does not make it in all of the books that many of us get a chance to read or be a part of. And so this opportunity to capture this conversation feels so important, not only for our organization, but also for the community. The wealth of knowledge and the wisdom and just the badassness of the folks that you're going to hear from tonight is really something to be honored and held. And so just again, sharing so much gratitude to the three of you for being here, and for Barbara also. So 1983, when we're looking back at the timelines, seem to be a hotbed of feminist activism, particularly around sexual violence in Canada, but also is really the beginning of our story as an organization. We went through some pictures together a couple of weeks ago, and it was just true joy to see the founders of this organization sitting on the grass and speaking at rallies in the early days. And so the amount of work that went into starting this crisis line that we still have, that is still used. We had over 5,000 calls on the crisis line last year, is just kind of blows my mind often. So in 1983, the crisis line started in the basement, or perhaps the bedroom, of one of our founders, and now is answered throughout the day by paid staff. We also have records of WAVAW influencing systemic responses for survivors around the criminal code. So the expansion of the criminal code from rape laws to sexual assault occurred also in 1983, as well as who under the law was able to report sexual violence. In 1989, we also have documentation that WAVAW was critical in influencing the Victims of Crime Act. Prior to that, victims of crime did not have access to timely information about their cases. They could not have support people with them. And the Victims of Crime Act really supported advocates and folks that were supporting survivors to ensure that they had their rights met. 1992 is another super important time where rape shield laws, prior to that, complainants of sexual violence could have their history of sexuality, sexual activity put before the court without any test being put before the court about its relevance. And we know that stereotypes about women's sexuality in particular, and queer community, sex workers, all of those things, the stereotypes around promiscuity and all of that played a huge role in whether people could seek justice before the court. And so the rape shield laws changed that. I mean, it's not that it protects everybody all the time, but certainly the fact that folks from WAVAW had influence over the rape shield laws is an important part of our past. In 2003, we opened the Sexual Assault Support Center at UBC, part of the AMS. There was, prior to that, a lot of folks on campus that were talking about being targeted for sexual violence, having folks come in off of the street and partying on campus, and causing a lot of harm. And there were just no supports on campus for folks. And so the Sexual Assault Support Center really attempted to meet survivors' needs on campus with hospital and police accompaniments, but also to create a space on campus to do culture change and education. From 2003 to 2006, we saw a lot of conservative politics, both at the federal level and also at the provincial level. So we had Gordon Campbell and the Liberals come in provincially in 2002, 2003, that cut all of the funding to sexual assault centers around the province. And then in 2006, Harper's government cut many of the Indigenous specific programs, the Cultural Connections for Youth, and that was a huge blow to our sector, but also to sexual assault and status of women. All of them were closed also following 2006. 2007 was one of the most amazing things that I've ever had the opportunity to participate in. At that time, Darla Laughlin was our Indigenous program manager, and she had this vision in her dreams. And she went to her elders to try to understand what she was being asked to do. And she was told that she had to host a smudge ceremony that basically brought together the 4 races to cleanse the downtown east side for Indigenous women who were going missing and had been murdered, and that the community needed support in order to heal. And so 2007 was our first year, and we went on to follow protocol to host 4 smudge ceremonies for each season. And at that time, we also signed treaties with our host nations to be able to host the smudge ceremony. In 2008, third-party reports, which WAVAW, along with other grassroots organizations in Vancouver, Downtown Eastside Women's Center, PACE, and WISH had been doing third-party reports for years. They started as an opportunity for survivors to share information with police anonymously and not have to report to police, but in order to share information for profiling purposes. And there was no structure put in place. So in 2008, EVA BC, along with a full advisory committee, made third-party reports standardized throughout BC and made it so that any jurisdiction within British Columbia, survivors of sexual violence would be able to use that tool. And then for the Olympics, we had a situation where the whole Sea to Sky Highway was being shut down, and there were no sexual assault services, no post-sexual assault healthcare outside of Vancouver General Hospital at that time. And so WAVAW, along with other organizations that supported survivors, collaborated to make a protocol in order to leverage people who lived in the Sea to Sky corridor to borrow their passes to be able to drive folks down from Whistler and up on the Sea to Sky to get care at VGH if they needed post-assault care. In 2011, the calls for the national inquiry began. We supported family members to testify throughout the national inquiry, and it was also the start of our family members program at WAVAW. 2013, we hosted our first round dance of 4 in partnership with Tsleil-Waututh Nation, and it was specifically to release any people, any women, any Two-Spirit people that had gone missing or had been murdered through colonial violence, that were trapped between worlds, and round dances have the ability to release people. And so we hosted that dance and also followed protocols to host 3 more after that. 2016, I think, marks the beginning of big things for the organization. It also marked the Liberals in 2015 coming into power, the reestablishment of status of women in Canada, and offices across the country. And at that time, we received funding to do a systems change project called Increasing the Confidence in Systems for Survivors. And there were a lot of learnings that came out of that. In 2017, following on the heels of that, our inclusion work began, and we began to look at expanding our service user population and did a lot of work internally inside the organization to prepare ourselves to ensure that we were able to offer gender affirming and safe care to all trans, two-spirit, and gender diverse survivors. And then in 2018, we attempted to make amends and certainly did the work of apologizing to sex working community for past harms that we had committed when we had taken a stance to accept the Nordic model as a model that the organization was holding and writing about. And we've done work to do better since then and have continued to take the lead from sex working community to advise us on how we can be of best use as we move forward. And now moving into the past couple of years, part of being vulnerable and accepting accountability is also making repair with community. And I think this was when I had seen Mary for the first time in many years. In 2019, we were invited to be Grand Marshals at the Dyke March and talked about what it means to be accountable to queer and trans and sex working community. And we were honored in that way, and that was fabulous. 2020 was a very interesting time. I know when we met, Stephanie asked me, how do you do sexual assault work virtually? Well, 2020 really invited us into figuring that out. And we adjusted, I think, used the word adapt, agility 1,000 times, but we've made it work. And I think what we've decided since then is that becoming a hybrid workplace is actually in the interest of equity. It allows people to choose what works for them. It allows for people that are caretaking that might have different disabilities happening for them to adjust their workday and be more flexible and be able to do the work that's meaningful to them, but also for survivors that couldn't make it to the office for any number of reasons. It's really allowed more people to access our services. In 2021, we really invested in looking at our relationship with transformative justice, with unintended investment in a carceral system that has never protected survivors, and also often not given them the outcomes that they wanted. We initiated a partnership with Just Outcomes. We joined the Vancouver Restorative Collective, and we continue to think about how the professionalization of our sector has also caused us to create binaries when it comes to victims and offenders, or people who have been harmed and have caused harm. And we've done a lot of work to really challenge ourselves around where those stories come from and how we understand them in our work. In 2022, some really big things happened. We began the process of rebranding. This comes on the heels of years of survivors telling us that our name no longer fit for them. It didn't describe what we did enough. It didn't describe our service user population anymore. And they were inviting us to evolve into all things that were next. And we also had the opportunity and are so thrilled about winning a nominal lease from the city of Vancouver, which we will be hopefully moving in the summer into, and we're really excited about that. And 2023 sees us evolving to Salal Sexual Violence Support Center, and brings us to this occasion where we find ourselves today. So for those of you that are not part of the internal team, here may be your first look at our new logo and the next stage of our evolution. So for those that aren't aware, Salal, which I was not aware prior to this process, Salal is all around us all the time. It is a plant on these lands that, as Felix says, anytime you go hiking, it is completely surrounding you. But it is also has been a plant that Indigenous folks on these lands have used since the beginning of time for wound care, also for food. They make beautiful bouquets of flowers and bring joy. But also in Arabic, Salal means waterfall, and in Hebrew means the action of lifting up. And so as we move into the future and evolve and live into our aspirational values, we want to ensure that our name reflected all of these different meanings so that survivors could see themselves in our new name, and that it reflects really planting the seeds for change, which is a huge part of what we do. So our three main messages around the story of our name is that it has diverse interpretations, that it really is rooted in the earth. Salal is also an incredibly resilient plant, and we also believe that as an organization, we are incredibly resilient, that we are transformative and we offer transformation, but that we are also nurtured and connected. And that this organization has always been and will always be rooted on these lands here on the West Coast. And Salal really is a trademark of the West Coast. So while our name is changing, everything else that people have grown to trust and count on is staying the same. So we will continue to support survivors on their healing and justice journeys. We will continue serving survivors of all marginalized genders. We will continue to be a hybrid workspace and service space where people have the choice to come to the office or access us online. We will continue with educational outreach and our social change work. We will continue hosting community ceremonies. We will always have gender affirming and culturally responsive programming. In fact, we will deepen that practice as we move forward. And our vision and mission of shifting society to create a world that is free from violence will remain the same. So now we'll let all of that sink in, and I will stop sharing my screen and pass it over to Barbara and the founders to have this incredible conversation. I'm going to do one thing to try.
Thanks, Dahlia. And I have to confess that we had a pre-meeting to get ready for this event, and I haven't had so much fun in a long time because we're about to share with you the memories and the experiences from a long time ago, from what is now a long time ago. Now, we had prepared some questions for the founders, except that because I am having technical difficulties, I don't have those questions. So if so, Dahlia, can you send them to me in the chat or something?
I absolutely can, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to begin by doing is to invite the founders to introduce themselves and to describe, maybe by way of an opening question, what took you to working on violence against women back in the day? Who would like to begin? I'm not above nominating. Oh, Stephanie, I see you volunteering. But you're muted. Stephanie, you're mute. There you go. You're muted, Stephanie. Can you hear me? This is what happens when you get a bunch of old ones like us. Mary, I'm gonna nominate you, and I'm gonna text to Stephanie.
Okay, I've got audio, I've got video. Oh, Stephanie, did you find your voice there? The
Yes, I
microphone,
did.
Do you want to go first? Okay, I defer to you.
Over to
Oh,
you,
it's me.
Stephanie.
Okay. Yeah, I was, anyway, yes, I'm back on now. It was at the very start of the women's movement, not when we were doing meetings in people's living rooms, but it was the start of getting organized, where the voice, the Vancouver, or the not Voice of Women, but there was an umbrella group. What was the umbrella group called? Anyway, the women's movement was just getting started. There was a large meeting that people went to. I didn't go to it. My neighbor went to it. And she was telling me about it, and she said, oh, there's all these, things to belong to. And I was like, oh, I should look at it. What's there? I heard the word rape, and I was like, that's where I am. I know that's where I am, because I'm a survivor of multiple rapes. And I knew that I wanted to work with at the crisis point of rape. I mean, there's lots of areas to work on. There's lots of learned papers to write and read and stuff, but I want to work with women right in crisis. So that's where I started from. And I went and I was interviewed by, I don't know, 3 of the 5 women that were starting rape relief at the time. And I remember one was Geraldine Glatstein, who was always a volunteer. And one was a woman named Angie, who had, I don't know if you'll remember, anybody will remember, but there was Inez Garcia was a famous case of rape that happened in the States, where a woman of grape pickers, her husband was trying to organize the grape pickers union, and the landowner's son and friend brutally raped her, and she went and got a gun and shot him. And it was a massive thing. Anyway, Angie had read about it in the paper, went to the phone book, and this is the value of having a findable name, went to the phone book and looked up rape and found rape relief. So she was one of the very first volunteers. They interviewed me, they found me acceptable, and I started as a volunteer. And after a couple of years, I became a staff. And on staff, it was my favorite kind of job, which is a jack of all trades. So I did counseling, of course. I did phone line, of course. I turned out to be a public speaker, which I didn't know I was going to be. And then my special areas of interest was I worked a lot in the forensic and the medical treatment areas. We helped set up SAS, the sexual assault response team, with the doctors at the hospital. I would like somebody to tell me after what you do about medical treatments now. And I did volunteer training, and I did training in counseling, and I took a miraculous course down the States that doesn't exist anymore, that taught me how to institute change in bureaucracies, which was a really fabulous course, and which I used to institute change in the bureaucracies. And that's me. I was on the board here, for a year, and then I wasn't. And then a few years, I think I was on the board about 3 various times. And then I wandered off to do other things.
Thanks, Stephanie. Mary Wu, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'll go next. First of all, it's really exciting for me to be able to join you from the unceded territory of the Bundjalung First Nation in the country called Australia, which always was and always will be Indigenous land. I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. I came to be involved in this work of trying to eliminate, because we haven't yet, eliminate violence against women from a position of having been a survivor myself of sexual violence at a young age. I was reading an Kinesis, which sadly is no longer with us, the newspaper Kinesis, and there was an article or an advertisement or something in Kinesis asking for volunteers for Vancouver Rape Relief. And my partner and I went and decided that we were going to volunteer for Vancouver Rape Relief. And we became collective members and counselors, taking phone calls over the telephone line. And because of my biracial background, I was able to converse with people who might have called in from my other part of me, the Chinese community. And so I was able to provide, unfortunately, was able to provide in a way, unfortunate because the case involved a young girl, like 4 years old, who had been assaulted by a family member, and the family didn't know what to do. So I actually ended up visiting their family and speaking with the parents and having to counsel them, because the little girl, when I talked to her, really didn't know what was going on. You know, and not being a child psychologist expert, I found myself actually dealing with the parents more than the little girl. But in any event, Rape Relief and the split between Rape Relief and WAVAW, I think, is in the annals of Vancouver's feminist herstory. There was a parting of ways around how to deal with and respond to the survivors of assault who wanted to continue with the legal system around reporting the crimes against them. And at that time, there was some debate as to whether we should participate in persecuting the people who were doing the sexual assault. So in any event, WAVAW was born because of a lot of us, and I know that names of the founders are going to be read out later, but a lot of us felt that it was really, really important to be victim/survivor centered, that our services should not be based on ideology or political viewpoints, because we all have different views. It should be very much based on this, on what the client, a victim survivor, needed from us at the time. And so really that was how WAVAW was born. And I served on the board of WAVAW until I moved to Toronto. But I've always kept track. It's like, sorry, I don't want to say this in any kind of like a, oh, I don't know, matriarchal way, but it's like, you know, I'm a mom trying to, you know, keep track of how my child is doing. And now I see my child is ready to just take wings and fly in a different direction. And so I'm excited about the next phase of Salal's development. And just don't forget where you came from. That's all I can say. That's what my mom used to say to me. So I'm saying to Salal.
Thanks, Mary Lou. And would you like to go next?
Sure. So, I had been active with other groups in the second wave feminist movement in Vancouver when I got here, after I got here. And I, lived in a commune with, which eventually became a women only commune.
Now,
And-
now I know that some people in the room won't know what a commune is, except
Oh, I can't believe it. Yeah,
I know.
I know.
Describe what a
Well,
commune is.
well, it wasn't, we were all feminists, but it wasn't like under the banner of a specific group, but it's just basically a home where everybody shares the home like a family. But there's a lot of time and energy spent on supporting each other and establishing our sort of principles of living together. And we actually, shared food equally. We did childcare. So it's a very egalitarian community based living. And some had more spoken principles, and some people just get along really well in others. So that's what it was. And I was doing a lot of different things. And I'll be honest, to me, hearing about rape relief with, was it Johanna Den Hertog and a woman named Sippy? Yeah. I'll be honest, because it scared me to do that work, I challenged myself to do it. I was into counseling, and I, like many women, I had been sexually abused and assaulted at an early age too. And I think that's probably why I kind of didn't want to go and do that work, but I felt I needed to do work with feminist principles in an area that I wasn't quite as comfortable with as other areas. And I found, I guess, like Stephanie, there's parts of the work I really, I think I did well, and I wanted to support other women. And I was able to integrate a lot of the thoughts and discussion around sexual abuse and sexual assault into my general feminist thinking. And I think it was important work to do, and I felt I could do it. Then, after a while, after certain staff changes, I started feeling that maybe I wasn't doing things right, or that the principles we were developing and working under weren't an accurate reflection of what women needed or had to say, and the women who were our peers and also the victims of sexual assault. And things I felt were going off the rail, and that I felt really uncomfortable. Some of the positions, women needing to do political work who had come for counseling as part of, they were told as part of their strengthening themselves. And there was just things going on that felt almost cultish. And so I couldn't be there anymore, and I left. And it turns out that many other people were feeling the same way, and that there needed to be the courage to speak out, and also to be grounded enough in the work, our thoughts based on the work we did in other women's experience, to speak out. And it was quite scary, and felt like a great risk. And the community kind of splintered in a way. And a lot of learning came out of that experience, the meetings we had, the statements that people made and were heard by others. And that's sort of how WAVA started. And to me, WAVA was like a panacea. And that's what I want to say. And I think people maybe don't know that a lot of the principles and support strategies and structures were new to this generation, that generation. And it was kind of going out on a precipice. And I guess I'm really proud of what we worked and lived and created. And when Dahlia said that we left a guidance, like we left policy and principles and things that they could follow up with and ground the current organization. And I'm just really proud that we were able to do that, because it sustained itself ethically and supportively for 40 years.
And so did you folks all find each other because you'd all worked at Rape Relief and came together? Was that how that worked? You were
Well,
all expert?
I was just going to say, there was this autonomous women's movement.
Yeah.
Right? That was so wide focused and strong that it could incorporate someone who lived in a nuclear family in the suburbs and came in and their life changed, but also a whole cadre, a group of people who really knew each other from Rape Relief, but from where Mary, I mean, and Stephanie.
I remember those days, and I've told a lot of stories about the last time we got together to prepare for tonight, and there were so many things that are different then than now, and one of them was that sense of the newly discovered feminism, which had never been named before then, and the kind of penny dropping moment, which gave us all an entire way, a way to understand our entire life, a complete and utter conviction that we could do anything, that we could do absolutely anything. And we did. And that sense of being able to connect and rely on each other in that broader women's movement in Vancouver is something that it's certainly not around today.
No.
And
I think that, oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Whoops. I was just going to say that I remember that, well, it's now labeled as second wave feminism, but in those days, we had like consciousness raising meetings, people were inviting people to have coffee or tea or breakfast meetings. Like we just gathered in friends' kitchens to talk about our situation as women and what we were facing and what we were dealing with, and the inequality that, well, it still exists, but just this energy to want to fight it and fight it together was really quite amazing at the time. And I just remember being the only one, though, by the way, because there weren't very many women from diverse communities that, first of all, came out as lesbians, and then secondly, recognized themselves as feminists and wanted to work in the violence against women area. But I was always, I felt very welcomed, but that's not to say that racism doesn't exist in our movement or in our workplaces. I mean, that certainly happens. But there was, at least in WAVA, there's always been a sense that if there's an issue, that we need to actually table it and confront it and emerge from it better. Just Dahlia going through some of the the herstory of WAVA leading to today, you know, there's many struggles that I know of that happened during that 40-year period. And I'm very grateful to all those concerned for their willingness to struggle through and come through the other side of it, but, you know, remain committed to the notion that women shouldn't have to be subjected to violence, sexualized or otherwise, and that there's a more egalitarian world that we can work towards.
One of the things that I remember was the conviction that the personal is political, and that we could find our way forward by those consciousness raising groups in which we shared the stories of our lives, and out of those stories knitted a program for action, like kind of right there at the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
That the struggle, Mary Lou, that you refer to, I particularly want to talk about the cataclysmic split that you folks created and manifested in taking away different from rape relief. And can you talk a little bit about because to me, one of the most amazing things that you did was to find a way to speak into what was happening at rape relief in a manner that yielded WAVA at the end of the day. Talk about what those meetings were like.
They were large community meetings. The
Like
word went
hundreds of
out.
people.
There was a lot. Yeah, there was a lot. I know because I chaired at least one of them. And I mean, it was basically the guts of the women's movement in Vancouver that came out. And hey, okay, thanks. The idea that there would be a split was quite horrifying to a lot of people. We were very careful with the meetings. We tried to make sure no media came into it. Every argument that you can imagine was put up. And of course, rape reliefs at the time, their big line was, are you revolutionary or reformist?
Right.
And so the women setting up WAVA were labeled reformist. But some of us felt very much that the women were not, like I had clients that I was no longer, that I referred to rape relief, that I worked with in a different way, that I referred to rape relief that were not dealt with in any kind of appropriate and supportive action at all. I mean, they tried to politicize them when they did not understand what, they weren't there yet. They just needed women to be sympathetic and supportive and help them through. And we felt that women were not getting services that they needed. And we were still, I guess we were still into being reformist. And so after I think there was two in community meetings, weren't there? Does anybody remember differently?
There were at least two, if not three.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure
And
about that
some-
third one.
And some had like 30, 40, 50 people. They were.
Oh,
they-
good 50 people. I
At
know
least.
remember
Yeah.
the building that they
Yeah.
were in, and they were well attended. It's quite amazing to think about how it really was a hot topic. It really was tearing the women's movement apart, and rape relief. Many of the people that worked with rape relief never forgave us.
Oh,
I think maybe it might be different now because everything's changed, but there was a lot of hostility, and yeah, and that's just really what it was. Like we argued our viewpoint that women needed services. They needed definitely good medical services. They needed appropriate forensic services. They needed educated police services if they chose that. Like there was just a lot of needs that we didn't feel were being met in the effort to do rape release effort to do basically political work. And And so we started up, and we had a apple box, a scribbler, a pen and a pencil, and a phone on the floor of our first office. And that's how we started, sitting on the floor with the scribbler to write our notes in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the few thoughts. I was gonna say one thing is that there was like a discarded couch in the place I was renting at that time. It had all these green cushions.
I
And
remember.
all I had left was these, and I had a lot of them because it was like an L-shaped couch. And we took it to WAVAW. And I think when they, somewhere like 25 years down the road, I went there, we had like a session on something, and they were still using them. And it was like,
That was our seating
But I
in the
think-
meeting room.
yeah, it was.
We definitely worked as a collective. Rape Relief was a collective at the time. We started off WAVA as a collective. So it was everybody had equal voice and equal vote. And we had,
Well,
really, we had 4 salaries, but we illegally kicked back money and created a 5th salary. So we actually had 5 staff.
I mean, you divided the 4 salaries among 5 people.
Yeah,
Right.
we did.
Now, who wants to take on a quick and dirty, what's a collective?
Oh, my God.
oh, well, before I get to the what's a collective, I just
Yeah.
wanted to say that fundamentally, rape relief's positioning of the discussion as revolutionary versus reformist, we were absolutely like, no, 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 you've got that completely wrong, because we are women-centered, right?
Mhm.
We are women against violence against women, and we want to provide the services that women need. You want to call that revolutionary? You want to call that reformist? You want to call that communist? You want to call that Marxist? Whatever you want to call it, we actually fundamentally, sorry, my position perhaps, but I think it was shared amongst some of us too, is that we don't actually really care how you want to politicize it. Our main point was that we want to provide the services that the people that are coming to us need, not with any political agenda. Our agenda is the women's agenda, is that person's agenda that presents themselves on the other side of the phone line or on the other side of our counseling session or so forth. And I still think that some of them didn't get that, that it was too, and they're still, in my mind, more politically oriented as opposed to service oriented towards the people who show up at the door, my opinion. So anyway, I have wanted to clear the air about that, because
Can you
I
say a little
think
bit
that was
about,
important.
can you say a little bit about what was and wasn't available in the world at large? For example, sexual assault kits in hospital emergency
Oh, no.
rooms. What was there? What wasn't there?
There was actually, initially, the forensic examiner was the pathologist, the same guy that looks over dead bodies. There was one for the whole area at like Squamish, out in the valley,
Mhm.
all the way. And he had no bedside manner at all. Like, he was completely uncomfortable with the fact that he had to examine a woman's genitalia for, to get samples. But they collected everything right at the crisis point. So here's this woman, she's shocked, traumatized, injured, and they're plucking 7 hairs by root and combing her, getting vaginal swabs and stuff. And sometimes women had to wait untreated for 2 to 3 hours because the guy had to come down from Squamish, like he was a Vancouver one, but he traveled everywhere. He was the only one in the whole area. So we started working, we got a grant. A lot of the things that we were able to do was because we wrote grants forever and ever. And we got a grant, and we worked with a Department of Justice, I think, and were able to develop with police, with prosecutors, with us, the sexual assault kit. But the sexual assault kit is not like, there was news a couple of years ago about the Maritimes hadn't collected, anything for trial, any evidence for trial, because they didn't have any kits. We don't have to have a kit. That's just a convenience.
Yeah.
It's the protocol. And we also, one of the big things we did was, you don't have to pull 7 hairs by root right in the time of crisis. You only need that if they find other hairs and then need to compare and contrast them. Well, it may never get to that. So there's a lot of invasive practices that they did that were not necessary at the time, or could be gotten at a later time. So we also negotiated with that, but that was a lot of work, getting the procedure changed and getting the doctors, the sexual assault offenses doctors, on board. And some wonderful feminist doctors agreed to be on call, and they would be the doctors that would turn up at the hospital, and they were, familiar, and they knew the materials, and they were feminists, and they treated the women well. And I also had a grant. So for the very first time that the pamphlet that we produced with the grant not only had information on people that were sexually assaulted, had information for their friends and family, it had a copy of every test that had been done, and if the woman had any follow-up. Because up to that point, women had been seen by the forensic pathologist, and he had done something to them that they didn't know. They didn't know if they should be getting a morning after pill. They didn't know if they had to follow up for STD. They didn't know. So this sounds so simple, that a person should be able to have a record of their own medical treatment and recommendations for any follow-up. But that was quite revolutionary at the time. People didn't want women walking home with that information. So there was like a lot of groundwork that had to be done to set up systems so that they were not so abusive. We also got did a lot of training with the police, and we had several police. Actually, we had one really great guy that eventually found it so traumatic that he had to quit the job. He says, "I've got a wife and a daughter, I can't do anymore." And he was a really, really good police interviewer for women. He was very sympathetic, and but yeah, we did a lot of training with police, and they varied by location. Like the Oak Ridge police were really good. The downtown police were crap, and but we had a lot of good relationships with them. And I could actually, you phone them and ask them maybe if they would do a drive-by someplace, where somebody, some young girl said her friend's dad was lurking around her house when she came home from school, and I'd get the police to do a drive-by. We had a good relationship at the time with them. But
The
what
other
other
thing,
services?
sorry, Stephanie.
No, go ahead.
The other thing that I remember is all those institutions had hardly any women in them.
Oh gosh.
There weren't women police officers, and there weren't women doctors, and there weren't women lawyers, and there weren't so you were dealing pretty much all the time with cis white men.
Yeah, in positions of power.
Yeah.
In long entrenched positions of power. Yes. Yeah.
And I think a lot of them actually underestimated the women that they were dealing with, because, we like Stephanie, lots of experience, and like we all brought to Rape Relief, and then subsequently WAVAW, our own personal experiences, education, whatever we were doing at the time, that's what we brought in. So a lot of the law reform as well that we were involved in, you know, we had like people that were lawyers, you know, Megan Ellis, you know, she did a lot of work with some others, lawyers and law students that were volunteers on law reform, and a lot of the information around what evidence needed to be collected and so forth. That was like collaborative work. And then we had folks like, you know, Frances Wasserlein and Ellen Frank. Like, you don't want to take those women on at all if you meet up with them. Like, they just did not take any guff from anybody, like male dominated occupations or not, you know. And so there were some really, I think, formidable volunteers, staffers that were committed and working on these issues, that a lot of what we have now and didn't have then is actually due to their hard work.
Well, and remember, back in the day, we did assertiveness training.
Yes, we did.
There's assertiveness training everywhere.
Yeah.
Because we
yeah.
recognized that we'd all been trained not to do that kind of standing up, and we needed to acquire skills. So we taught each other.
That just triggered something that I can't forget, because at the time, that's when the Green River Slayer was around. At the time, a lot of police, there was even movies and speakers that went around, were telling women not to fight back. That was a really big thing.
Yeah.
Don't fight back and you won't get injured. You might get raped, but you won't get injured. You know, and my point of my argument always, like in speaking engagements or whenever, was always that, you know, being raped is not an agreement. You know, I let you rape me and then you don't bash my head in with the hammer. It's not an agreement. Like, what a stupid argument. But they were really, really pushing that women should not fight back. And we had,
Yes, which was then
we caught
used
each other
against us
fighting.
in court.
That we didn't fight
Which was
back.
then used, that we didn't fight back. So that was used against us in court. It was like,
Yeah, you know, there was a book in our office, because, you know, we accumulated lots of things that people donated. And I remember it had an article in it, and said, chivalry was a protection racket. And I'll never forget it, because it just, it tweaked it a little bit for me more than anything I had done. And I just want to show you this. This is a graphic from a woman's newspaper from 1986. And it's basically, let me see if you can focus on that. Anyway, it's all these women. It says, liberate yourself from being nice. And the caption is, oh yes, that's fine. And it's all these women sort of like this. It was just a satire on what I think society kind of wanted. And I think one of the problems around the rape relief WAVAW issue was that they presented themselves being very radical again, and we were becoming more and more establishment. But what it meant is we were actually affecting the establishment and
instituting change in bureaucracies. It's a
we were
wonderful
instituting
concept.
a change in bureaucracy, and the way supports are organized based on peer feedback and peer support. And they kept making it look like we were selling out. And in a way, that was
the
and they were
viewpoint,
doing that on purpose.
Yeah.
Mary, it wasn't like they didn't get it. They got it.
So I'm going to circle back to the, can somebody, who's going to take on describing what it's like, what a collective is? Because the reason I'm coming back to that is because in the last couple of weeks, I've found people who are a generation or two younger than I am kind of look at me blankly at the concept. So describe the structure and the feeling of those, of collectives and collective meetings.
Hmm.
At its worst, it's management by committees.
Yeah.
But essentially, it's one person, one voice, one vote. But
Mm.
that's not only like just because you're the staff doesn't mean you have any more input than the collective. The collective was all the rest of the people that were not staff, and there was only 5 staff. So you had 20, 25, maybe more volunteers. So wrangling, now, not everybody came to all of the meetings, mind you, but it involved talking and arguing basically for hours. And mostly, if somebody won the argument, but you felt good about them as a credible, honest, hardworking person, just of a slightly different view, that was fine. You gave in, you went, okay, that work will be done. There were occasions, though, that you're like, I do think this woman is a little Looney Tunes. I'm quite sure she said that that woman was raped because she wore red, and then, if you didn't win that argument, you just didn't win that argument, right? So, yeah.
And the model of decision making, at least as I recall it, was a consensus-based decision making.
Consensus.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes,
that was
yes.
so different than, calling for a vote
We
and
fought
moving.
that.
It,
There's no
that
way.
was,
Well, I mean,
I just always argued that I
my
was
memory.
entitled to have my opinion, even if I was disagreed with. I didn't have to change my believed opinion just because 20 other people didn't believe it. I could go along with it, as in a vote. I could say, okay, I'm one of the 5 that voted, and there's 25 that voted the other way, so I can go with that. But don't tell me I have to believe something different than I have. So I always argued about consensus. I'm more majority
Yeah,
vote person.
Mary? Yeah.
I think it was we evolved over time to, at first, decision making by consensus, and then it ended up being just who could last longest at a meeting to actually achieve that kind of consensus. And then we went to consensus without blocking. So if you didn't want to agree with something, but you weren't so adamant about it that you didn't want to, block that decision from moving ahead, then you could keep your opinion, keep your position, but you don't exercise your block, right? Then it went to, that didn't actually work out well because, there were people who wanted to block just for the purpose of blocking. We have people in our movement like that. And so it ended up having to be in the model where it was simply majority vote.
Yeah.
Because it was the kind of, in my memory, even though that everybody had the voice, but at the end of the day, when it was the decision to be made, it was the majority decision, right? But I just remember some like I remember one meeting, which was a hiring committee meeting. One of the most contentious I ever attended. It was 2 in the morning. 2:30 in the morning before I said, I'm sorry, I have to leave. I gotta go to work the next day.
I want to add that people like Ellen Frank, who was very articulate and very grounded, would say, this discriminates against mothers. I can't stay up all night here to argue a point, and that was like, oops. There were a lot of single people in the movement and that. And so I just want to say, but also there was the fact that if someone was a good orator, if somebody was very articulate and highly educated, they could hold forth in such a way that they would, well, in any society happens, they would influence the decision, but the plus I want to say about that whole process, it was pretty hard for making decisions, but you sure learned a lot with the consensus and the discussions. You really turned ideas over and really thought through. And I think the principledness of the discussion was, for me, a joy, especially having lived under an authoritarian patriarchy for so long.
And that was really why we did it, was because we were trying to practice ways of being in the world with each other that did not reproduce the hierarchical structures of the world around us. And so we kept feeling our way through different models and formations that did or didn't work, or didn't work less well or more well in those.
There was a national conference of rape crisis centers when we used to have a national coordinator, and we were all connected across Canada, all different setups and all different funding and all sorts of that, but we're all feminists. We all worked with sexual assault victims. We're all helping each other. And we were setting up the conference, and everything was mailed out ahead of time, the decision making, the Roberts rules, the whole thing, policies that were the agenda, it was all done on the very first day. A bloc from Ontario decided that we could only make decisions, even though it had all gone out months ago, that it was going to be a majority. They decided we could only make consensus decisions by consensus. We had French translators there. I mean, this was a big deal. We flew people across, and the first day and a half were taken on arguing with consensus before we even got to any policy or anything else. And then it was going to be consensus minus 10% or consensus minus, 15% or something. Oh God, it was alarming.
Brutal.
I mean, trying to have consensus with a whole representative of the whole country.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, wonderful, nice work if you can get it,
Well, and as Anne says, an amazing experience to navigate and to make, because you were making it up, literally making it up as you went along, literally.
Yeah, we were
creating like societal structures within our own universe that we thought were healthy. I mean, there was a bias, that worked, and that was life affirming and healthy. I mean, that is a bias, and supportive of women and their special life situations. And I think it, for the most part, it really happened. And sexual orientation, diversity, gender. I mean, it was great. But I also want to say that at that time, coming from the old new male left, the new leftist,
right,
class. And that's what we spun off of. I came out of the States, bursting out of that milieu, and I couldn't wait to get far enough from it. But it came from the old Marxist tradition. So class was spoken of as often, if not more often than today we talk about,
yeah, you're right.
And class was everything. And I think, again, with Rape Relief, the accusation of being bourgeois or, class was and it's valid to a degree. It really is. But that's passé now too.
Well, and there was in the big picture in Canada, there was so-called liberal feminism. There was Marxist feminism. What else? What were the other?
The one that was a very commercialized, which was like women's lib. The same as men, whereas good as men. I mean, what an insult! You can make it. very capitalistic too. What else was there?
Well, I know that,
Well,
I
that was
know that,
that was a time you had Trotskyites and Maoists, and
Oh, yeah.
there was so much political activity happening all over the place. And then the REAL started up, and then we had to deal with the REAL, which I don't know
What is
if
that?
people don't know what that
understand
is.
the Real Women.
Oh,
REAL,
them,
Real
yeah.
Women. Yeah, the
Andrea
conservative, the
Dworkin.
very, very conservative wing, yeah, Real Women had to, well, they just didn't like what was going on. Women should continue to be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. So we were speaking out against that. Not that we weren't against it. Women should have the choice. Feminists, that's the feminist principle, is that women should have the choice. You want to make that choice, that's great, but society should not be making that choice for you, or making it harder for you to make other choices. And I think that yeah, so there were like movements and becoming politically aware. And I think, was it Barb mentioned the personal is political? I think we also realize the political impacts the personal. So we better get political. We
Right.
better understand how the system works, so that we can actually not reform, but like implode it from within if possible, but just to, to change things. You can't keep being from the outside. You got to send some agents provocateurs into the inside and deal with it that way. But yeah, it was a very it was heady days at that time, because we weren't just dealing with women's liberation, we were also dealing with sexual
Right.
liberation. Well,
The
at that
pill.
time it was the LG,
Yeah.
and then came the B, and then the whole gamut of the rainbow community. But yeah, that was quite something. And then, as I was saying earlier, there wasn't a lot of there were.
Yeah,
I
can you
think
talk about
somebody
that?
asked about question about the power, like how power is exercised. And marginalized women were involved in the women's movement, right? But because we were marginalized in society, I think that we really had to demand voice. And then our sisters gave us the opportunity to raise our voice. So it was really important. I think some of the collective members were very astute at making sure that if they hadn't heard somebody speak, they would say, well, what do you think about that? Or, they'd be actually really good facilitators around making sure that people did have a voice, because power was exercised by
Right.
domination. So, and we had some people by their mere presence, in terms of physical and intellectual, if you will, or great orators, were able to just, it was like the populace, the populist politician, right?
Charismatic
That can
leadership.
hold an audience, right? That can hold an audience. And so they held the power through holding the audience. I think that, that in some ways became rape relief, because there was a very powerful dominant person that just
That's
held
where we
sway.
split from. Yeah, you're
Leadership.
right.
And that's how we, that's when we also split, because there were things happening around power and exercise of power that as feminists we had, real problems with, and could see it happening, and we're just really quite concerned about it and continue to be concerned.
See,
I won't
I
name the
I was-
person. It's
I
like
was in
number
the closet.
45. I used to name them.
Yeah,
I was
I
gonna
was in the
say-
closet as in the women's movement. And the
Wow.
women's movement didn't like lesbians back in the day. Because the argument went, they'll think we're all lesbians.
Well,
And then with the women's movement will lose credibility. Do you remember that, Mary?
I
And-
absolutely remember that. I absolutely remember that. But thank goodness, I have to say, at Rape Relief, and then subsequently WAVAW, that was not my experience with them. But in the broader women's community, it was primarily white. It was
class.
primarily upper class,
class, okay.
and it was
Or
very
poor lefties.
primarily, yeah, well, yeah, but the poor lefties at least, could find us, and, like we had
Oh,
some things
totally.
in common in terms of like marginalization. So we were able to find places of commonality, but yeah, but it was really tough being in the women's movement at that time. And I don't know. I mean, it was really hard sometimes being the only one, but I was never made to feel
No.
like the only one by my collective members in Rape Relief, which is, I think, a huge kudos to them. But
Did you-
yeah.
In the early days of WAVA, did you explicitly work on making connections across difference?
I want to say this before my aged brain will forget it. Both of them relate to counseling, which is a lot of where my intense interest is. But I got grants so that I could get together groups of women from other communities. We worked with the Indian Homemakers Association, which was really good. Sorry, I'll just turn that down. The Indian Homemakers were a wonderful group, which were, of course, Indigenous women. And I said, that's such an interesting name, Homemakers. And they said, nobody notices us under this name. We can run under the radar when we're called Indian Homemakers, right? But a lot of the other communities, hang on. Cannot talk. There. The women, like when I was trying to get information on sexual abuse, child abuse, wife abuse translated into other languages, and when I was trying to find counselors who could counsel in other languages, we had women that did not know the terminology in their own language. They had never heard those words spoken in their home. And a lot of them were very, very reluctant to go to like parents to do it. And so, in a lot, the white women really were just further ahead in talking about the issue out loud, because there was an awful lot of shame. We had a Greek volunteer who was an excellent, always turned up, always did the translation, was very dedicated worker, but we had to be very, very careful when we or the crisis line people called her, not to let on that it was anything to do with this kind of work, because that kind of work was unsavory. Geraldine Gladstein, who is Jewish and Indigenous South American Indian, she broke up a relationship over the fact that her then partner's family could not tolerate the fact that she worked in such an unsavory population of people, right? Couldn't she get a nice job at the Bay? So there was a lot of lagging behind because of shame and social pressure of people from other language groups or cultural groups or of skin color. It just was not talked about. But imagine that you do not know the words in your own language, and a lot of the women didn't know that they didn't know the words until they started looking for them.
Sorry,
Well,
Stephanie.
and I was just going to, sorry, and I was just going to add, for example,
I know that Anne has been just, had her hand up for a while. Can we hear from Anne for a minute and then back to you?
This goes back to the discussion of decision-making, and I mentioned the class issues around oratory. People, and Mary mentioned it too. And also the idea of the faction, you know, what were the streams of feminism? But there was an article written pretty late around that time in the 80s. To me, that's the late women's autonomous women's movement period. That was in some magazine. It was called The Tyranny of Structurelessness by a woman named Jolene. And do you remember that? And it basically talked about the lack of hierarchy and the openness of the structure could lend itself to a situation where you had power imbalances, just like you had outside the women's movement, because of people who were, you know, highly articulate or well-educated in that, and that was something to look out for. And I think she also talked about people who were stars. And the interesting thing is it actually generated for the first time a lot of discussion that it wasn't all, you know, flowers and whatever, that there were some inner politics going on.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to mention it because I remember thinking about that as we were going into WAVAW. And yeah, it's interesting. I think WAVAW blew it all open in a way, you know, with those meetings. It was almost people would get up to the mic and you would get a sense that I don't know how to say it, you know what I mean? There were things about the women's movement that they benefited from, but they didn't quite have the sense of, here we go, community and mutual support, you know. That's all I want to say.
When some women had held and used their position as they turned it before we left Rape Relief, one of the reasons is that a couple of the women were turning their position into a position of power that they held on to. And that really made me very concerned about their counseling, although they said all the right things about their relationship to their clients and in previous work and stuff like that. But like when you're counseling and you're doing somebody a great service and they're very thankful that you are there to help them out, to support them, to give them information and stuff like that. I call it being elected goddess. You know, they'll be like, oh, you're so wonderful. You know, I wish I could be as wonderful as you. You're so smart. You're so wonderful. And they will willingly give you power because you're in this helping position to them. And it's wonderful to be elected goddess, you know, but the whole point for me, the basic point of the women's movement is that not only to obtain your own personal power, but then to show other women how they have their own power. And for me, that was a big part of my counseling, was enabling them to have their own power. I don't have power because I'm particularly exceptionally wonderful person, maybe, or I have power because I've learned, I've practiced, you know, like it's counseling for me is partly turning power back to your client so that they walk out the door with it and you don't sit there holding it. And that made me, the position at least a couple of the women were taking in Rape Relief at the time, made me very concerned for how they were dealing with the women. Because from my view, if you don't go that extra step, you give them information, you're counseling, you're reassuring, you're a wonderful person. But if you don't go that extra part of turning it back to them, making them, helping
Yeah.
them feel empowered, you haven't really done your job.
That's a really nice segue into my next question, and I'm going to start with Mary
Oh,
because
can
I
I-
know that.
Yeah.
Ju-
So, can I just answer the last question first?
Sure.
Just around the diversity question, because we're talking about the 70s and early 80s, and we cannot underestimate the impact of systemic discrimination on our ability to connect with other groups. So for example, if I take Chinese Canadian community, just a small community, but we had just come out of the Chinese Exclusion Act. It wasn't that long before the 70s that barrier came down, and there was open immigration from from the Chinese community diaspora into Canada. Like, for 50 years or so, there was a big gap. And then, Indigenous women were dealing with, centuries since colonization, just systemic discrimination, and African Canadian women or Black women similarly, and so, trying to reach out to those groups where the impact of systemic discrimination was such that, talk about power, the powerlessness even was magnified through intersectionality. And so I think we now have those words way better than we had them back in the 70s and the 80s. But, the difficulty of organizing with communities that have been so marginalized is that you have to build the trust. You have to build the relationships with those communities because without those relationships, without that rebuilding of trust, which I see from WAVAW and since the 90s have been building with the Indigenous women through support of the inquiry and so forth, that was very important work. And then women within their own communities also organized, so we have specific services now, I understand, in Surrey for women as well. And so, back, you can't really, I think it was really hard in those days to connect up with other communities because of that systemic discrimination, racism, barriers that those communities had faced themselves, let alone our little group of people trying to, deal with our issues within the wider women's movement and trying to make connections and so forth. So I think that's really important to note.
I'll be right back.
Just to make a note of, marginalization and the systemic discrimination that caused that contributed to a difficult linking up with other groups.
I'm going to ask, thank you, Marriott. That's really captured that piece really well. I'm going to ask you a double-barreled question, and I'm going to point at the clock because we've raced through the time that we have. So here's my double-barreled question. First of all, what do you think is feminism's greatest accomplishment in the last 40 years? Just a little question. And what do you want Salal to take forward from the founding women? What do you want Salal never to forget? Who would like to tackle that first?
No, we're not all jumping at once.
Yes.
I'm gonna, without really thinking this through, because many things have, you're saying that influence, I wrote it down here, influence of feminism on society?
Well, what did feminism get right? What's the
Gee,
biggest success? Or
Well,
what would you say
I'll
is?
tell you, it's sort of like, it's hard to tell if it's feminism or luck or what, some of this.
Mhm,
But because I was there close to the beginning, and it could have gone strong. I mean, I won't talk about less violence or but it's sort of people's belief system a little bit. And towards the beginning of the women's lib of the,
mhm,
it looked like the trend was really growing dumbed down and consumeristic and a status relevant, that basically the women's movement would be if women had good jobs only, wielded power like men do. In other words, if we were more like men and achieved making simply better money,
mhm,
then that's what women's achievements, women's rights, what that would elevate women. That's the answer to women's problems, is to be like men and make more money.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Smoke the
yeah.
same cigarettes, not those
Yeah.
sissy Virginia Slims. And they really, in the bra burning label, they really tried to marginalize, and that's where the Mary's issues around marginalizing people is relevant too. They tried to marginalize women and their real needs and continue to control them by making these, assuming these would be the goals, and the feminism pushed against that. And some of us chose to do that work, and some of us had to do it to survive.
mhm,
You
mhm.
wouldn't buy into the enemy's agenda. And those were the really brave women, as far as I'm concerned. I could have hid in plain sight.
Yeah.
I could have gotten a job that I couldn't have gotten maybe before, and just disappeared. So that to me, that was the wonderful thing. And
Mhm.
and if they say anything really influenced the current thing of, peer-based and egalitarian and rights-based and what they call now social justice, a lot of it started with the women's movement,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
so that's what I want to say. And
Is
a
there
lot of the
something?
strategies that are used were
Yeah.
ones developed within the women's
Yeah.
movement.
Was there something you'd want Salal to never forget?
I think they're doing a great job.
Can I tell you something,
I
Barry?
don't know. I can't think of anything. Well, one thing that Dahlia said that was really great is that she's a sociology history wonk. And I guess it's, don't assume what you have now is what always has been or what
Mhm.
what can be.
Thanks, Anne. Stephanie.
Yes, it's a little resentment I always had, but I chose to do it, so it's my fault. But
What's that?
it's about being accessible to all women.
Mhm.
So also being accessible to the, upscale wife of the stockbroker from West Van. And, we were working in a women's environment. We were setting our own standards for how the work went and everything. So, the place was full of dykes that were looking butchy, and the place was full of, people that wore their eye makeup in a lightning bolt across their face, and like a lot of different things. So I felt that I had to be the person that was accessible to the really straight women, in the old-fashioned view of straight women that walked in the door. So I was always relegated, I felt, to wearing all these really straight clothes, straight everything, so that I could be the face of the face for the, you know, the stockbroker's wife. And we had everybody. Yeah, but I was always ticked off about it, but I felt necessary to do, so I just kept on doing it.
You were like the token that's
I was
straight.
the token straight, yeah.
But you were the token straight woman. I loved it, you know.
Stephanie, is there something you want Salel never to forget?
It's always the clients for me. It's always the women that come to you, or women, you know, like the umbrella of women. It's always the clients. It's about them. The changes that we try to make in society that changes everything is also that we can respond better to the women that come to us. And I don't know what Salal's educational, you know, area is like now. But I remember when we first started trying to go into schools and stuff to do talks, and you know, some forward thinking teachers would have us come in. We'd be met at the door with a list of words that we were not supposed to say. And seeing how this was the old definition of rape, which was penis vagina contact, we'd be met at the door being told we couldn't say the words that actually the law of the land at the time, right? So now I see so many changes, you know, that in what people are aware of now. So I do think, aside from the fact that I think the counseling is super important, it's the educational aspect too.
Thanks.
And always try to institute changes in bureaucracies, of course.
Yeah. Maroon, you get the last word here.
Oh, gee. Well, I've seen things change, and I've seen things stay the same in so many ways that, you know, I mean, women now don't have to quit their jobs just because they get married, or because they have women, or because they have children. You know, with the whole Me Too movement, the whole notion of sexual harassment and violence, and how inequality manifests in that way, has been magnified. And I think that, you know, we're no longer surprised. Oh, gee, you know, that young girl wants to be an astronaut, or somebody who looks like a Kamala Harris may one day be, you know, president of the United States, you know. So I think that the strides that we've made are there. But I think that we still have a long way to go. I continue to be very disappointed in some of our feminist sisters who, you know, still have major issues with our trans sisters. I'm very, very disappointed. You know, I mean, really, we're still dealing with oppression. We're still dealing with marginalization. We're still dealing with big picture issues. And you want to actually like exclude another marginalized group of people because one day they weren't born, you know, I don't get, you know, to me, it's like, you know, what would we do? What would we do if people with disability organizations started saying, oh, you weren't born blind, so we're not providing you with, you know, Braille services, or teach you how to use Braille, or library books, or so I don't, that part of it still doesn't make a lot of sense to me, that our trans sisters are not being accepted
And
in the way
non-binary
that I
folk,
think they should be, you know. So that I think that we still have a lot of growing and a lot of self-examination and a lot of struggle yet to do. I continue to be concerned about anytime we ask for our rights, we're politically correct, or now the word is woke. That's a way of marginalizing us.
Mhm.
And I don't think that we have actually understood that those labels that they put on us, we're asking for more, which still isn't equal, but we're asking for more. We want more. We want more inclusion. We want more acceptance. We want, to live our lives freely, to love who we love, and so forth. That all of a sudden to actually voice it is woke or politically correct. It used to be politically correct. Now it's the word woke. So
Mhm.
I think that we have to be really cautious of buying into those kinds of accepting that that's okay. It's another way of marginalizing and dismissing what we're asking for.
Mhm.
And we shouldn't be repeating those words. I will never, I try not to call anybody, politically correct or, woke. No, they're just asking for something that they believe they should have. Let's try and understand what it is. So I think that we've still got a long way to go. And then in terms of Salal, I think that so long as they're grounded in who they're serving, remember, who are you serving? You're serving marginalized community, you're coming to you for help. And they've experienced violence, they've experienced something, that no one should have to go through. And as long as you're centered in that, grounded in providing that service, I'll support everything they do. And I'm very glad that Salal, previously WAVAW, struggled through some really hard questions around, trans inclusion and racism and, other things that, well, I'm sure will come up in our evolution as a species and then as an organization. And as long as we're willing to struggle, to ask questions and to come to hopefully an open heart, an open mind to that, it's, as we say in Australia, good on ya.
Yeah, thank you. I want to hold up my hands to the three of you in deep gratitude for this evening's conversation. It's incredibly nourishing for those of us at who are in our age bracket. And I think I probably speak for everybody who's in the audience. An unbelievably rich, nuanced piece of history, inspiration, direction. And so for me, thank you. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dahlia.
Thank you all so much for this conversation. It has been truly an absolute joy. I'm just gonna pull up the slides again, and we'll just take a moment to honor all of the founders that were part of starting WAVAW, and also honoring that we've lost so many folks. And I know Mary and I have kind of gone through this list, but honoring that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I've
So
forgotten some of these.
yes, when I joined WAVAW in 2002, I know that Christine McDowell was still on our board. And I know that she passed away probably 10 or maybe even close to 15 years ago. And I know that Frances Wasserline has also passed away.
Mhm.
And so
Helen Frank.
Ellen, yeah.
Yeah. We used to turn red and yell at us. That was
Oh.
wonderful.
Yeah, my favorite Ellen Frank comment was when we were at each other's throats practically, she'd say, "What we have here is a situation." That's all.
You did that so Ellen Frankish, by the way.
Who
That was
said that?
great. Oh my
Mary?
God.
Yeah.
What?
So yeah,
Oh.
just honoring the fact that the three of you have shown up, and also that Betsy was part of our conversation when we met a week or so ago, and that all of these folks obviously are part of the shoulders that we are standing on, and also just part of the group of people that really have set us up so well to endure the past 40 years and be able to continue on.
Thank you.
So we wanted to share with folks just before we wrap. I know we've gone a little bit over time, so if folks need to leave, that's okay. We'll keep recording until the very end here. We invited people to share with us what they wanted to say, to kind of embark on this change for themselves. And so people have shared these notes with us, and I'll maybe read them. It may take about 5 minutes or so, and then I'll pass it over to Sharon. So this one says, this is a powerful moment in your organization's herstory, their story, and legacy. Congratulations on 40 years of leading the way and supporting survivors and shifting society. We can't wait to see what you will achieve as Salal. This was a message from West Coast Leaf. So Salal, your friends and admirers at West Coast Leaf cannot wait to work with you. We're looking forward to dreaming big with you and imagining all the possibilities for collaboration. WAVAW, we are so grateful for all the gifts you've given us about how to transition our organization and our work to meaningful gender inclusion. We know that journey continues, but we also know that without your support and guidance, we've not come this far along. My heart is so full for all of that you do. It's been a beautiful journey to be part of WAVAW for the past 10 years. Congratulations on 40 amazing years supporting survivors. I can't wait to see the phenomenal work you folks will do with Salal. It's been an honor working alongside of all the staff, volunteers, and board members, both past and present. As we enter this new era, I look forward to not only the new work for survivors that will come with this change, but to carry on the amazing work WAVAW has done for survivors for the past 40 years. Birthing Salal and celebrating the long history of a truly caring and committed organization. It's been an honor to work alongside you all. Saying goodbye to WAVAW feels like being part of an evolution process. It is filled with love and passion for the anti-violence movement that I would like to welcome Salal as the place where great ideas, activism, services, and work will start, develop, get implemented, and will be shared with us all. Thank you, WAVAW, for holding us in intergenerational connection with our roots. And thank you, Salal, for warmly symbolizing our growth. Make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and one is gold.
Yeah.
Change can be hard and unsettling, but I am excited to see the ways a new name can facilitate new growth and opportunities for this vital organization. Hooray for Salal, and thank you, WAVAW, for paving the way. Thank you, WAVAW, for helping me on my survivor journey. You mean everything to me. Goodbye. Welcome, Salal. I cannot wait to change the lives of survivors with you. Welcome into the space, Salal. I'm so delighted to watch your journey through the world and will follow all of the beautiful impacts you have on people around you. This is a nice quote. The most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or touched. They are felt with the heart. I continually value the compassionate, evolving, and responsive nature of WAVAW. Now, Salal. Congratulations. Excited to collaborate and support Salal in your great work. And there we are. We've made it to the end of this really incredible moment. And I think just taking a moment to actually sit with the reality of what we're doing, of what we've done, is really quite something. So what I'll do now is I'll invite Sharon to come back in, and I'll stop sharing and pass it over for a closing. And then if people would like to stay on, because I know we've gone past, after Sharon is done, I'll stop recording. And then if folks want to stay on and have a conversation, then we can do that. Sharon, over to you.
Well, I just feel so gifted tonight listening to the stories, and Dahlia encouraged me to jump in, but I just was hanging on your every words. And I put a link in to an article online about the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and women's rights. And Sally, we were touching on diversity and embracing marginalized people in the community. And Sally Roche Wagner, who is a scholar on the Haudenosaunee women's rights, said when she was young and in university, she started to read about this. And she said it sunk like a stone beneath her wisdom, because as a young scholar, she wasn't ready to take it in that Indigenous people women had equal rights enshrined. She said it just sort of blew past her. And as she got older, something triggered a memory, and then she started to advance this knowledge and work with the Iroquois community. I actually phoned and had a conversation with her. I was thinking about making a film, but I just wish to acknowledge this, that in many tribes and communities around the world, at one time, there was equality. And the second thing I just wanted to comment, because nobody's talked about spirit. And in the liminal space, religion has been so divisive in our world, but spirituality is where everything connects. It's all my relations. And in the liminal space, when we pray, it's inviting the potential, the unknown forces in the world to be present, that we're here now and we can step into something new. So I invite all of you now to just turn inward and take in that idea of what are the possibilities here, what is sacred and about to unfold. And this is why we do all my relations, to acknowledge that. So I invite everybody here in this circle to just turn inward to the place where your life force resides. And we're always remember the beating of our hearts, because it's the first sound you heard ever. Vijimanatu, creator of all life, we give thanks for the stories, the wisdom, the teaching, the memories, the good feelings, and the passion that was shared tonight. And we ask with deep humility that this fire continue to burn in the hearts and minds of young leaders, young healers, young medicine women, young advocates. And we ask for strength and courage and energy. We ask that you help us to show the flow of life so we can come together and bring beauty into the world in the new entity, Salal. Help us to remember what was, what is, and what will be. All my relations. Oh. Thank you so much. And thank you for all of your
Yeah.
amazing dedication. It's really touching.
Well, it's certainly lovely seeing some old faces and seeing how you've grown. Oh my God.
Yeah. You accomplished so much. Yeah.